Thank you for joining us for the second episode of LowCountry Law on Air. Tonight we'll be discussing Community Crisis Response and Intervention. It's a program the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office got into with the South Carolina Department of Mental Health back in 2018. And what that's provided us with is a way to better deal with mental illness on our calls for service and to have a resource available to provide intervention and additional resources to help treat these people rather than the vicious cycle of them being involved in the criminal justice system unnecessarily, and also to reduce emergency room visits. So our first guest tonight is Edward De La Fuente. He is a crisis counselor with Community Crisis Response Intervention, again, part of the South Carolina Department of Mental Health. Edward, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm originally from Texas. I just got transplanted over here from Texas about a year and a half ago. And when the call came out that they were getting ready to start a program here in South Carolina doing mobile crisis, it piqued me because I think there is a very big need for mental health intervention. Like you said, to kind of lower the instances of unnecessary jail time or emergency room visits. And I think it's important as professionals that we go out and interact with the community, with the people in crisis, so that we can determine what the crisis is, so that we can either try to keep them in place or, let family become aware of the situation so they can monitor their loved one and help them through the situation.
And what's interesting about this program is that you are located at the Hilton Head Sheriff's Office, work alongside deputy sheriffs south of the Broad, which is Hilton Head Island and Bluffton.
Correct.
And Tiffany Jones, who's our second guest, has an office in our Beaufort County Law Enforcement Center.
Right.
So again, working alongside the deputies and providing that immediate resource rather than an on-call situation where it could take hours to get somebody there.
Exactly.
It's been very effective, and we really become a great part of our team. So tell us a little bit about your education and why you decided to get into this.
Where I became interested in psychology was more when, as I was growing up, I started seeing that people would interact with me very comfortably, very easily, and I kind of thought the profession at that point wasn't as big of a need as it is now. And as I've gone through the process of educating myself with my bachelor's in Texas and eventually an online program helping get my master, I've seen the need and the benefit of being licensed and ready to help people because the demand is there, the need is there, it's an overwhelming need, and I think it's important that, with the Sheriff's Office focusing their attention on this, it's really important that we get out there and try to help the community as best as possible.
Well, an interesting conversation I had earlier today was with the Director of Public Safety for Beaufort County, who also oversees the Beaufort County Detention Center. And he estimates that a third of the inmates that are brought into the Beaufort County Detention Center either suffer from mental illness or are in crisis, maybe they're in treatment, but they are getting, it's become a de facto treatment facility. Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that for us?
Well, we do work together with the local mental health clinics, and they do have a jail liaison that is available on site to be able to assist with those kind of situations. So part of our efforts in working through community crisis response and intervention is to network and get to know some of the partners in the community, become more familiar with some of the symptoms and incidences that are occurring in the community so that we can kind of bring all the people in play together to be able to coordinate our efforts to get that person the help they need.
Well, do you feel so far the program's been successful in identifying those that have multiple exposures to law enforcement, not just the Sheriff's Office, but also the municipalities in Beaufort County? Have you seen, is there a good volume of work? Do you stay busy out in the field and, interacting and at least able to guide those suffering from crisis or mental illness to treatment and therefore avoiding unnecessary exposure to law enforcement.
Yeah, I think it's been very successful. We do attend roll call at the sheriff's office in the evening, so we're in regular communication with the deputies as far as anything that may be occurring, or if we get any information from the clinics regarding a certain individual that may be struggling, we'll keep them on our radar so that we can, be involved in their treatment, so that we kind of become more preventative than waiting for a crisis to come up.
Well, that's great. So the National Alliance on Mental Illness, they offer crisis intervention training to law enforcement. And in checking with our training officer today, we've had over 140 deputies, and the municipal police departments have had much of their staff trained in this. Can you tell us a little bit about that training and what it does to prepare the officer to walk into a situation where there may be somebody suffering again from mental illness or a crisis, and how they can de-escalate that? Is that training valuable?
It is. I think it really prepares the officers for what might happen. You can never be really fully prepared, but I think since we arrived in Beaufort County, we've already assisted in about 3 trainings, and the officers have been very proactive, very interactive, and it's a very good training in the sense that it focuses the attention on the different aspects of psychology as far as what can be going on with an individual, and there's a lot of role playing involved too. So they kind of get prepared for what might occur, and hopefully it doesn't get to that point. And at the same time, the deputies and officers are aware that we're available as well. We're just a phone call away. We can come out and assist on scene and try to circumvent any situation that needs to be addressed.
So the de-escalation, the training of how to successfully deal with somebody in crisis, we find that it's invaluable, especially when you're trying to assess what's going on and find the best options. So obviously you've been called by deputies from a scene saying, Edward, what do we need to do? Can you respond? Can you assist?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the process basically is either the deputies will contact us directly. We do have a statewide crisis number where the families or the officers can call. And in essence, once the call comes in, we will assess the situation, find out what the crisis is per se, and then from there make the determination. If we do need to go on scene, we will definitely go on scene and have a conversation. When we do go out, there have been times where we will go out and we're not necessarily talking to the deputies directly, but might get a call from the clinics and say, hey, can you check on this person? And so from there, we will go and call the deputies in. When we respond with law enforcement. So that's not to say that we're coming out with the intention of anybody getting detained or hospitalized, but it's just for the safety, everybody's safety involved. And so that's what we do. We go out, we'll assess the situation. The deputies can give us over the phone the information as to what's going on, and we'll make the determination as to what the appropriate steps should be.
Okay, well, Edward, thanks for joining us. We'll be right back with Tiffany Jones, who is the Community Crisis Response and Intervention Counselor north of the Broad River.
911, where is your emergency? To repeat the address for verification. Is he breathing? You don't feel a pulse?
Most of the time when these people are calling in, they're having what might not be an emergency to you, but it is an emergency to them. And they need someone they can talk to who maybe not necessarily understands what they're going through, but is compassionate about what they're going through and empathetic and trying to keep them calm until help can get there for them.
You said his hand is cold?
An emergency service dispatcher really is the first responder.
The lifeline to connect you with emergency services.
They are the ones that get the initial information. They're the first person that a caller speaks to give them that emergent information they have. And the officers, we're the first ones to speak to them to get them rolling and get them en route.
EMS 1, respond to a cardiac arrest.
We take non-emergency calls and emergency calls, everything from I need a number for this place.
Lockout of vehicles, property damage, vandalism, armed robberies, shots fired.
Loose dogs up until death of a family member.
A lot of these people that are calling in are not having their best days.
You gotta wanna help people and wanna be that voice of reason.
This could be my family member on the line, and I want to provide the best service I can to my family, so I try to treat every person that calls into this center as if it was a family member of mine.
I can give you instructions on CPR, but you'd have to get him over on his back. Are you able to do that?
There are days where it's very overwhelming once you get in the door.
We're not acknowledged as first responders, but we are the first responders. To be able to give somebody the help in their time of need is the best thing. That's what we do. That's what we come to work to do. Come to work to help.
Hi, this is 911. We had to hang up from those numbers. Everything all right?
It's a very, very rewarding career.
It's never the same from one day to another.
Okay, what's going on? Someone's taking your mail?
You're always getting something new.
I grew up here, so to be able to give back to the community in a positive way, to me, is probably the best thing about working in this career field.
I am a
Beaufort County
911
Emergency Services Dispatcher.
Welcome back to LowCountry Law on Air. Our second guest is Tiffany Jones, who's part of the Community Crisis Response and Intervention Team. Tiffany is embedded in the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office headquarters on Duke Street in Beaufort, working alongside our deputies and addressing mental health on our calls for service. Tiffany, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name's Tiffany. I am actually from the Lowcountry. I graduated right here from Battery Creek High School. I guess education. So my bachelor's is in criminology and criminal justice from the University of South Carolina at Columbia, go Cox. And my master's is in clinical counseling and psychology at the University of Chaminade in Honolulu, Hawaii. I have about 7 years of experience with the military. I was a combat medic. I have done 2 deployments. And I'm back here in the Lowcountry to offer all the talents I've accumulated over the last 20 years or so and see what I can do for you guys down here.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Thank
How
you.
about that? So tell us what you see the value of having a community crisis response and intervention team working alongside our law enforcement in Beaufort County, and what the need was, and what you're seeing in your duties.
Okay, so I think it's a 2-pronged thing. You got preemptive care, and of course you have continuity of care. And those things are essential when it comes to community policing. It makes sure that everybody's attended to and cared for when they need to, and we can address things faster. And it's always nice to have a therapist in your pocket.
So it is a function of community policing.
Absolutely.
Bringing South Carolina Department of Mental Health to the table and saying, okay, we want to help understand crisis and mental illness in our community and to better address it rather than having a revolving door at the Beaufort County Detention Center or at the hospital emergency rooms.
Well, it's not just the revolving door piece. We can preemptively deal with those very severely mentally ill individuals before they become a criminal justice type issue. We can also redirect them from the hospitals, which is awesome. But the thing that I love most about it is being able to address those little stressors before they become big issues here in the community. Because you have to understand, crisis isn't necessarily always I'm shooting up a school or I'm stabbing people or I'm having a psychotic episode. Sometimes it's I'm just an ordinary person dealing with extraordinary stress and I just need somebody to talk to. And so Edward and I and our team, we provide that for here, not only just for our community members, but for law enforcement personnel, for EMS personnel, dispatch, our community providers, teachers, students. It doesn't matter if you're a part of this community, we care about your mental health.
Okay. So would this program have an impact in maybe identifying those that may want to harm somebody or be involved in like a mass shooting that we see all the time on national media?
Absolutely.
So expand on that a little bit about what service you provide to head that off.
Okay, so you're talking about the preemptive and just kind of like tracking individuals. So that's another part that we do with the Department of Mental Health. Edward and I have access to something called electronic medical records for here in the state of South Carolina. So any individual that has ever interacted with the South Carolina Department of Mental Health, we know what's happened with them before. So we have that information to give law enforcement personnel so that they're not going in cold for calls, things like that, or whatever, when they have somebody who may be potentially psychotic, suicidal, homicidal. So that's definitely a leg up over, what we were doing prior to. Working in tandem with you guys, it's just understanding what your processes are, educating you on what our processes looks like. I believe it does help us provide a better quality of care to the community members, in my personal opinion, I think.
Okay, so what you're telling us here is the people that have already been diagnosed with mental illness, that have had contact with mental health providers in South Carolina.
Absolutely.
That's one thing. But what about people in crisis that really we don't have a handle on what's going on there? And what service can you provide to people that are under these extraordinary stressors that day to day, I mean, people are, there's a lot of stress.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So then you have access to a master's level clinicians or whatever, actually 3 of us at a time. 2 of us actually respond on scene and 1 is left behind on the phone. And with that is you get a brief mental status examination from yours truly, my partner, or one of our team members. And that's more than, hey, do you know your name and where you are? That's something detailed. I need to know whether or not, you can have a coherent conversation, what type of psychosis you're having. I know from my clinical background, I can lean on that to tell you whether this person becomes a danger to themselves or others, and if they need a higher level of care to begin with, because we can actually plan to keep people in place where they are and just get them those services sooner rather than later.
Right. Well, look, we really appreciate you being here today, you and Edward, and obviously it's a great service you're doing for this community and teaming up with law enforcement, and look forward to having you back someday on the show.
Oh, goody, come drop.
We'll be right back with LowCountry Law on Air with Jessica from our Forensic Services Laboratory. Talk about opioids and the crisis.
Disaster planning consists of 3 simple steps. Make a plan, build a kit, stay informed. Every family should have a plan for how they will communicate during an emergency and where they will meet if separated. Having basic emergency supplies on hand will keep you alive during a disaster. Monitor local radio stations for important information and updates. Visit bcso.net for more information.
Cars all over Beaufort County are being targeted by thieves. We want to remind you not to leave valuables in your car and to keep your doors locked. If you have any information about recent thefts, please contact the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office or Crime Stoppers.
Welcome back to LowCountry Law on Air. We're now going to be talking about the opioid crisis and its impacts in Beaufort County. In 2016, we saw an alarming increase in overdose cases, most of which were opioids. And we'll talk about what opioids are here in a few minutes with our guest. We saw 5 deaths in 2016 associated mostly again with opioids. We saw in 2017, we saw 26 deaths. And again, 5 times that were overdose cases. Of course, a small percentage are going to be deaths. 2018, we saw a decrease, which is good news. And in 2019, we saw a decrease again, also good news. In 2017, Sheriff Tanner, Beaufort County Coroner Ed Allen, Jasper County Coroner Martin Sauls got together with the Beaufort County Alcohol and Drug Abuse Department and came up with a public awareness strategy. And what we do now is we get involved in these national overdose awareness events. One is on August 31st every year. We participate in DEA drug take-back events twice a year. In 2018, in partnership with the Beaufort Memorial Hospital and the LowCountry Alliance for Healthy Youth, we installed 3 drug drop-off boxes, one in northern Beaufort County at the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office headquarters on Duke Street in Beaufort, one in Bluffton at the Beaufort County Government Center on Bluffton Parkway, and one at the Hilton Head Island Sheriff's Office substation at 70 Shelter Cove Lane on Hilton Head Island. Since we've installed these drug drop-off boxes, our residents and guests have brought in over 3,000 pounds of unused and expired prescription medications. And what happens with those drugs at that point, they are transported to Columbia to the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division or to Charleston to the Drug Enforcement Administration and properly disposed of. So that's gotten a lot of drugs off the street, and we like to think that's had an impact on the decrease in opioid overdoses in Beaufort County. Our next guest is Jessica Zipfil from the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office Forensic Services Laboratory. She's a forensic chemist, and she actually analyzes the drugs that are seized from the street and has been seeing opioids. Jessica, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about your background and what we're seeing here in Beaufort County regarding opioids.
Thank you, sir, for having me. I am a forensic chemist with the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office Forensic Services Laboratory, and my job duties there involve analyzing evidence that has been submitted from law enforcement agencies for the presence of any sort of illegal drugs. So this is evidence that may be collected at a traffic stop or may be collected as a result of a warrant, but also evidence that can be found on scenes of these overdoses. So we analyze a lot of the evidence associated with these overdoses, and we have seen all different types of opioid substances. As you mentioned, we saw a very large, saw our first increase from 16 to 17. I think like six-fold in the types of the number of items that have been submitted to the lab where we have identified heroin or some other sort of opioid substance.
So what is an opioid? Can you break it down as far as to our viewers, you know, painkillers? What are opioids?
There's lots of different types of opioids, and a lot of things generally in the public knowledge kind of fall under the opioid category. You have things such as prescription painkillers. These are like Lortab or Oxycontin. A lot of people have had prescriptions for these. If you've ever had your wisdom teeth taken out, or if you've ever had a knee replacement, you've probably had a prescription for one of these painkillers. But there's also the more illicit, the things like heroin or even fentanyl, which is a prescription substance itself, but we see a lot in illicit form, not a prescription form, where sort of like just pure powder that has been submitted to the lab where people are consuming these things and unfortunately are overdosing because of the effects on the body.
Okay, and what makes these drugs so addictive to where it's become a crisis in the United States and here in Beaufort County as well?
A lot of these opioids, especially not only the prescription kind, but the more illicit kind, can be addictive after just one use. And so somebody who uses something once will need to have another fix immediately. And
so somebody with a medical need
yes,
after surgery can easily become addicted to
absolutely. There's a very slippery slope from a legitimate prescription usage to a substance abuse or an addiction. And a lot of those who are overdosing or those who have these addiction problems started with legitimate prescription painkillers.
Right, so prescribed by a doctor, sometimes maybe prescribed too many.
Yes.
And all of a sudden that slippery slope you're talking about
yes,
occurs, and we have somebody in crisis and who's addicted.
Yes,
and then
unfortunately, that's a lot of times how it starts. And as you mentioned, the drug take-back boxes that we have in Beaufort County has been really instrumental, I think, in the decrease in the amount of overdoses that we've seen over the last couple of years since we've installed those. Getting the prescription drugs that are in your medicine cabinet that are expired, that you're no longer using, get them out of your house, and so that these sort of addictions never have to begin to start off with.
Right, and you know, we hear about family members coming into the house and looking through your medicine cabinets, and all of a sudden they're on the street being sold, and it just perpetuates the problem.
Absolutely, and so providing these drug drop-off boxes where no questions asked, you can drop off any sort of prescriptions that you have laying around, gets them out of your home, out of the hands of somebody that might be on that slippery slope to an addiction.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your background, where you came from, and how you got into forensic chemistry. What was the interest there?
Absolutely. I have been with the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office Forensic Services Laboratory for 5 years this month, actually. Before that, I worked for about 5 years with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation at their state forensics lab. I earned my Bachelor's of Sciences degree in forensic chemistry, and I have just always been really interested in chemistry, and I thought the forensic discipline was going to be an interesting way for me to use my passion for chemistry, and it certainly has been.
So as far as opioids and what we're seeing here at the laboratory, you've seen the gamut. You've seen fentanyl, you've seen heroin, you've seen prescription painkillers.
Absolutely. We've seen all different types of opioids, and we see them in waves in the sort of opioids we were seeing in 2017 are not the same types of opioids we were seeing in 2019. So we get these certain trends. We see also mixtures of things. So we'll see heroin mixed with fentanyl, or heroin mixed with acetylfentanyl. And some of these fentanyl derivatives can be quite dangerous. They are incredibly potent to the point where some of them, such as carfentanil, is used legitimately as a large animal tranquilizer. So just a few milligrams, which if you can think about a few grains of salt, it can be deadly to a human being. And so we get some items in that contain that, and it's obviously dangerous to whoever's using the substance. It's dangerous to whoever's responding to the scene, law enforcement, and it's dangerous to those analyzing the evidence in the lab as well.
So let's talk about Narcan or naloxone, which is the antidote to turn around or reverse the effects of an opioid overdose. In 2017, we trained all of our first responders in Beaufort County, Sheriff's Office, and municipal police departments, and they now carry Narcan, and it's been successfully used to revive those overdosing on the side of the road.
Absolutely.
So tell us how that protects us.
That the antidote Narcan, or the main substance, which is naloxone, is a sort of reversal drug. So anybody who is currently in the midst of suffering an opioid overdose can be administered this substance, and it will reverse it and keep them alive until emergency medical services can provide the services, take them to the hospital, and get them the treatment that they need. But it's an immediate reversal so that these overdoses are no longer resulting in immediate death. You mentioned we trained over 250 officers at that training from Beaufort County and surrounding counties as well, so that there's more of this reversal drug on the street, so that our citizens who are suffering these overdoses have a greater chance of surviving because they have access to this reversal drug.
And our first responders who are accidentally exposed to it as well.
Absolutely.
Well, Jesse, we really appreciate you being here tonight and hope to have you back on the show. Join us next time on LowCountry Law on Air. We hope you find our show informative. Sheriff P.J. Tanner will be joining us next time, and we're scheduling for February 12th at 7 p.m. on the County Channel. We're going to be talking about recent and numerous shooting incidents north and south of the Broad River in Beaufort County, and look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining us.
If you have a question or comment, please contact LowCountry Law on air at lowcountrylaw@bcgov.net.
The County Channel is also available on video on demand. Go to BeaufortCountySC.gov, scroll down to Public Meetings, click Watch Now, and then click the Video on Demand button and select your program from the list.
Call the meeting to order.
If you'd like a DVD of this program, click on the link on the right and fill out the order form. And thank you for watching the County Channel.